Psalm 121. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and your going, both now and forevermore. My wife Colleen has this playlist, 70s road trip. You know, great tunes, open road, windows are down, crank it, baby. Psalm 121. Psalm 121 is part of a group of psalms called the Psalms of Ascent. It's like an ancient Hebrew road trip playlist. Everybody going up to Jerusalem. Jerusalem's a high point in Israel, and so when they would go to Jerusalem for a festival, they would sing these songs. They would begin by singing them to themselves, and then they see other worshipers on their way, and they would sing them, and everybody knew them. This was the plan. The Psalms of Ascent. We're going up, and we're going up together. Road trip. Psalm 121 begins, I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come from? It says, if you work the punctuation differently, it might sound like the hills are where he's going to get his help from, but the hills and the mountains aren't good news. Not for foot travelers, not for hikers. Mountains mean more work. Mountains mean better places for bandits to hide. Mountains are problems. They're struggles. Where am I going to get my help from? The mountains were also the site for pagan shrines. If you read your Old Testament, your earlier scriptures, you hear conversations around the high places, right? And so as a worshiper who was going to Jerusalem to worship the living God was looking, you could see these high places where pagan shrines were, and sometimes even the people of God themselves had these high places. Where does my help come from? It's not coming from the mountains. The mountains are problems. Where does my help come from when I've got problems? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. It's a declaration. I trust in God. Good times, I trust in God. Bad times, hard times, tough times, I'm trusting in God. I choose God. Declare my faith. Declare your faith. You've got choice. You've got your choice whether to go with God or not. Some people choose to go with the no God option. You know, you're on your own. When things are going great, you got one person to thank. That's yourself. Look at me. I'm fantastic. When things are tough, you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And if you get through it, when you get through it, you got nobody to thank, nobody to point to but yourself. It's all about me. Right? Being 97. Being 97 is a documentary I watched this past week. And it's the end-of-life musings of a 97-year-old philosopher. This philosopher had written a dozen books around social, psychological issues, criminal insanity, alcoholism, a dozen of them. And he said, when I finished each of the book, I kind of felt like I'd solved it. If you just read the book, it's taken care of. And in his 70s, he wrote a book about death. And he wrote in the book about death, this was his summary, it's not rational to fear death. It's not rational at all. When you die, you become nothing, right? You have no more pain. You are nothing. There is nothing to be afraid of. Sounded pretty smug when he was in his 70s. Now he's in his 90s and he doesn't feel like that anymore. He says it in the documentary. He doesn't like the idea of dying, and his realism trumps his rationalism. He's afraid. And he finds himself sitting in his wheelchair wondering if maybe he didn't get everything right. Maybe there is more to life. At 97, he's starting to doubt what he'd believed all his years. It's actually worth watching. Being 97. Skip the first 5 minutes. It's on YouTube. Skip the first 5 minutes. It's painful. It's watching him get out of bed and get his food into him. But the rest of it's worth your time. Here's the point, though. You get to choose. The Bible's super clear. There is a God, and you get to choose. You can choose for him, or you can choose against him. But this much we would all agree on, life is a journey. We're all on a journey. And people who choose to have the living God be their help, right? They've made a God choice. Psalm 121 shifts right after that. My help is in the name of the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. And it shifts. I don't know. I never paid attention to this before. Just saw it this time when I was studying it. But it moves from the first person. My help is in the name of the Lord. And then it moves to the second help, where it says, he will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will neither slumber or sleep. It transitions from first person language to second person language. What's going on here? I think it's this. I think the person writing the psalm made a declaration of faith. And that being the case, another person swoops in and says, okay, if that's the case, then here's the blessing that goes along with that. Here's the blessing. You choose God as your helper? Okay, then this is for you. He will not let your foot slip. You know, if you're a foot traveler, the thing that you've got mostly to be concerned about is your feet, right? Your ankles and your leg. You bust your leg, you blow out your ankle, you slip over, it's done for. That's not good. If that's the case, you got to go home. There's no sense in limping your way on to Jerusalem because you're just going to have to turn around and limp all your way back there. He will not let your foot slip means, you know, you're going to finish. If you blow out your ankle, if your foot slips, it's a DNF. It's a did not finish. It's a fail. It's a you're out. So when you say, hey, I choose God, what God says to you is, okay, then you're going to finish. Okay, then this journey, I'll see you through on it. Okay, then you're mine. It doesn't mean that Christians always only ever sprint across the finish line. It doesn't mean that Christians always have a bounce in their step. It doesn't mean that we never roll our ankles or sprain. It doesn't mean that at all. No, sometimes we don't look so great, but God's got us anyway. My dad was a high school quarterback. He could run, he would brag about this. The 440 in 59 seconds, the 440 kids, that's old language, that's yards, would be the 400-meter race. Now, he could do it in less than a minute, 59 seconds. He was a self-proclaimed gazelle. Boom. Last 5 years of my dad's life, he lived in a wheelchair. And the 10 years before that, he had a walker. He will not let your foot slip. And my dad will stumble around. I remember him falling down the stairs once, breaking ribs. He will not let your foot slip. Now, you know, it wasn't easy to watch, but this is the thing about my dad. It's the thing about anybody who places their faith in Jesus Christ. You finish. You finish strong. You finish well because God's got you. You know, my dad had a joy and a peace at the end of his life that I don't think he would trade two good legs for. Jesus held him. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. You know, if the first concern for a person who's hiking is the route and making sure they don't blow out their ankle, the second concern for anybody who's hiking, at least open country stuff, is nighttime. Right? That's when the noises happen. That's when the wolves howl. That's when what was that? What was that noise? That kind of thing goes on. Right? And you kind of concerned. But you need to sleep. But you can't sleep, but you need to sleep. Here's what Psalm 121 says. You need to sleep, but God doesn't. He who watches over you will neither slumber nor sleep. God's got you, and so you can sleep. The Lord watches over you. I don't know if you pay attention to these kinds of things. I do. I get some time. I get my pen out. I mark my Bible up. I mark up the script. 5 times that word is used. The Lord watches. The Lord watches. The Lord watches. Another way to translate it would be the Lord guards, right? But the Lord watches. When the Lord watches over you, it's not like me when I watch SportsCenter where I'm kind of like dozing off and fading in and out. Well, who won that game? That's not it. The Lord watches and the Lord guards is more like a shepherd term, right? A shepherd who's watching his sheep. He can tell when one is limping. He can tell when one is dehydrated. He can tell when this one's at risk, when this one's falling behind, when this one's getting too far ahead. A shepherd watches like that. The Lord watches over you, doesn't miss a thing. More than that, this term, watches over, actually might point to a practice that shepherds had. When shepherds moved their sheep out of town and they were out in the open wilderness in the pasture, they sometimes had to spend nights out there by themselves. And you can imagine that having a bunch of sheep around and wolves around is a bad combination. The shepherd had to figure out what he was going to do with that scenario. And so what the shepherds would do is they would go around the wilderness and they'd find these thorn bushes. And they would gather the thorn bushes together like a corral. It would be a big round thing like an igloo without the roof on it. And then you put the sheep all on the inside. And then he would finish the circle out. So there was thorns all around him. And all the hungry wolves that wanted lamb chops for dinner or breakfast couldn't, because they didn't want to get a thorn in the nose. And so what he's saying is the Lord watches over you, is that even when there's bad guys around, even when there's bad things around, even when they're super close, God says there's a hedge of thorns around you. You're protected. I've got you. The Lord is a shade at your right hand. You know, one of the word shade can also get translated shadow. Shadow. And so, in a sense, what I think the passage is saying is that the Lord is as close as your shadow. It's like, you think of that Peter Pan moment. Like, you can't get rid of that. It's right there. And he's right there and, in a sense, protecting your right hand. What's with that? So sorry about this, lefties, but right hands were what you did, what you were good at with, right? So if you were a carpenter, you hammer with your right hand. If you were a slingshot guy, then you threw with your right hand. Or if you're a bow and arrow guy, you did that with your right hand. Your right hand is kind of like your identity. It's like your person. And this passage is saying God's got your body, God's got your mind, God's got your spirit, but say it this way, he's got your person, who you are. God's got that. He's the shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, the passage continues. When I was 15 years old, I got sunstroke. I was on a canoe trip. I was trying to bronze up for the ladies, brown skin, and every angle was going to come down, sun, get me all brown. Didn't have a hat on, didn't have any sunscreen on, and I was sick as a dog for a day. Had to spend a whole day in my tent. I just came out to throw up and then go back in. Sunstroke. And 15-year-olds all around me were on a canoe trip together. They all had to wait a whole day because I got sunstroke. How much do you like me now? Sunstroke for a hiker, for a person walking in Israel, is a possibility. You can't avoid the sun. It's there. And when the passage says the sun will not harm you by day, it's like God is saying on the unavoidable things in life, in the places where the grind of life, God is saying, it's not going to take you out. I got you there. God says, I got you there in the grind of life, in the unavoidable pieces. I know all about it. I know it's heavy. I know it's heavy right now. I got you. I got you today, and tomorrow I'll have you as well. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. Well, is that kind of silly? The moon, like you don't get sunburnt by the moon. So like just trying to be poetic. Is that what the writer's doing? No. The ancients used to talk about moonstroke, right? We talk about lunacy. Lunacy comes from the word lunar, which is about the moon. It's about when your mental health isn't what it needs to be. It's talking about the sun. The sun is like when outside agents overwhelm you. When it's talking about the moon, it's talking about when inside issues overwhelm you. And the blessing of God is that he's got you through both. Outside pressures, inside pressures, God says, sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. Now, there's a part of you that's saying, I think he might be overstating his case here, right? Because as far as I can figure out, Christians get cancer just as much as non-Christians do. Christians are in car wrecks just as much as non-Christians do. Christians have heart attacks just like non-Christians do. We get raped and we get robbed and we lose our jobs and we lose our babies. That sounds like harm to me. The Lord will keep you from all harm. It seems like we're facing some harm. Here's the point. The believer will never be destroyed. In Luke 21, Jesus is saying the very same thing, and he's talking to his disciples. He's talking to you, and he says these kinds of things. You will be betrayed by your parents. Brothers and sisters will hand you over. Friends and relatives will do this. And they will put some of you to death. Everyone will hate you because of me, but not a hair on your head will perish. Stand firm, and you will win life. Some of you will be put to death. Not a hair on your head will perish. Clearly, Jesus knows that there's more to life than just this life. That there's a greater story being told here than just our 70 years here, right? Dying isn't the worst thing, especially when you have the promise of resurrection. The worst thing would be to die without hope. The worst thing would be to live and to die without hope. Some of you will die. not a hair in your head will perish. The Lord will watch over your coming and your going both now and forevermore. You know, back in Jesus' day, there were two groups, Pharisees and Sadducees. They were the Jewish thinkers. And the Sadducees, I think, got most things wrong. They didn't believe in life after death. They didn't believe in angels or demons. They're kind of like plain Jane vanilla types, you know, what you see is what you get. But one of the things they did get right was they worked to make the most of the life they had. We could learn that. See, being a human being, being a Christian is not, you know, plugging our nose to wait to get to heaven. We believe in Jesus, so let's just get to heaven. That's not it at all. The point for us here and now is to live out the hope of the kingdom that we've got. The point for us is not just to die and go to heaven. In time, that will happen. But it's to know Jesus now, to live from the kingdom. And when the time comes for us to die, and it will come for each of us unless Jesus returns before then, when it comes time, right, then it'll just be more of that, more of knowing Jesus, and in time, more of the kingdom. You see, dying for us is it's not the end of the game. It's like changing periods. The Zamboni comes out and new sheet of ice, and boom, baby, we're back into the game, right? And we have this promise that nothing can snatch us from his hand. Okay, so last thing on this passage. Most of the psalm is a blessing. I think I've tried to say that. The person declares faith, and there's like, oh, if that's the way it is, then boom, let's bless you. It just struck me this week. What if we bless each other more than we do? What if we used words to say encouraging things that God's doing in your life, right? What if those were our words? The Lord bless you, right? The Lord guards your steps. The Lord watches over you. You know, the sun's not going to harm you by day. Hey, the moon is not going to get you at night because the Lord has you, right? It would just be saying all the things that are true, believing that what God says is right and good, right? Believing that God keeps his word. It might be a bit corny, wouldn't it? Wouldn't be especially Presbyterian, at least in my experience, but it sure sounds Christian to me that we would speak blessing over each other. Instead of like, hey, be safe. Hey, we'll catch you next time. What if we said things like, the Lord bless you? What if we said things like, the Lord's got you? Hey, the Lord makes his face shine upon you. So the Lord bless you, and the Lord keep you, and the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his attention, his face towards you, and give you peace. Hey, go, assured of this, with the Lord's blessing, the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God the Father, and the friendship of the Holy Spirit this day and forever. Amen.